The United States men's national team completely flopped in the Copa America. So a few players and their spots with the national team as starters, or maybe even within the roster, must be questioned. On top of that, we are getting a new coach soon, or maybe by the time you're watching this, we even already signed a new coach with new ideas. With that said, are there any US men's national team prospects, or maybe even veterans, that were not in the 2024 Copa America roster that could make it and play for the United States in the 2026 World Cup? If yes, who are they? Hi, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to part 2 of this 2-episode mini-series that we have with Adam, USMNT Stan, on Twitter. This is how it's going to go. So yesterday, we already released episode 1 with Adam, where we went through the US Men's National Team 2024 summer. Go watch that, or don't. Do whatever you want. I'm not your dad, and I can't force you to do it. Now, for part 2, which is this episode, we're going to talk about players that could break into the US Men's National Team World Cup roster in 2026 that were not in the 2024 Copa America, based on this summer and future projections. And we're going to do it like this. For a total of 6 players, we're going to have 2 on each tier. So 6 players in 3 tiers to determine if they can be in the roster or not. The first tier, which will have 2 players, of course, is called the legit shot tier. These are players that are very likely to make that roster, even though they weren't in the Copa America. The second tier is the 50-50 tier, which is pretty self-explanatory. There's a 50% chance that they'll be there. Last but not least, we have the last tier of this video, which is the underdog tier, which are players that are less likely to make the roster, but they could shock us and make it to the World Cup. Okay, got it? Pretty easy. 6 players, 3 tiers, 2 players on each of the 3. Very easy stuff. Capiche? So of course, let me know your players, and as the good YouTube host that I am, I must now beg you for likes. The same way we have politicians constantly begging you for donations, I beg for likes. So you have 2 choices here. 1, you can hit the like button and help this weirdo right here for free, or you can donate your hard-earned money to someone that will find a way to screw you over. The choice is easy. Easy and obvious. You do neither. Why do any of them? Okay, everyone. Part 2 here with Adam. This will be a quick one. This will be a quickie, Adam. A quickie. I'll go quick. Okay. So we're gonna do what we want to do right now is the summer's over. Some player we talked about in the previous video, stocks up, stocks down, new coach coming in, and we're 2 years from the World Cup. With that said, as always, the roster always has surprises, and there's a few names here and there that could make it to the 2026 roster that were not in the Copa America. So the rule right here is that we can mention any player that was not in the Copa America roster, but he can't be retired also, so can't put Breck Shea. That said, we're going to do 3 tiers. We have 3 tiers. The legit tier, which means is a player that we're like, I think this guy has a legit shot in making the 2026 roster. Not starter, just roster. And then the 50-50. 50-50 is that guy that you're like, literally 50% chance he'll make. It's like, he's there, but at the same time, there's a lot of upside and downside. Then we'll do the underdog tier, which will be 2 players that it's not likely, but they could surprise. They could shock us and make it to the roster. Do you want to start with the underdog or the top tier?
Ooh. Let's start with the top tier.
Okay.
Why not?
Okay. I'll go first. I'm just gonna give my 2 names right away because then we'll make this episode quick. I promised it to be a quickie, so we gotta go quick. No foreplay. We're cutting right to it. My 2 players are Leonard Maloney and Taylor Booth. And why do I think it's legit? 1, it's a roster. And we're talking about Tyler Adams getting injured left and right. Leonard Maloney brings versatility. He plays in the Bundesliga consistently. We are likely going to sign a new coach that's either European or a Pellegrino Materazzo that's been in the Bundesliga for quite some time. So I think Leonard Maloney making it to the roster, as long as he's healthy, I think it's a legit possibility. A player that can play center back and play 6, mainly the 6, can play left back, is reliable. I think it's legit. And Taylor Booth, I'll tell you why. I think our winger depth kind of sucks, right? It's like Pulisic, Weah, and then Aronson, Haji, that had some good moments or bad moments. Taylor Booth, every time I watch him play, looks very promising. Very good on 1v1 situations, very dangerous, very direct. I think as long as he stays healthy, I'm expecting him to have a breakout season either this year or next year, as long as he stays healthy for Utrecht. And I believe there's a legit shot he can make the roster. It's a 26-man roster, so he might have 4 to 5 wingers, and he can also play the 10 if you need. He can play there, or as a second striker at times. So I think Taylor Booth being there is realistic. Even though this summer he barely played in the Olympics, I thought it was a mistake from Mitrovic, because even when he came on, I thought he looked really good on the ball, Taylor Booth. I think there's something there. So I'll put Maloney and Booth as the two legit shots. And just to recap, Maloney plays for Heidenheim in the Bundesliga, and Taylor Booth plays for Utrecht in the Eredivisie.
So I think important context before I give my two. So I think that it's really important to understand that I think the Copa roster was the right roster, right? I remember your video before. I think you agree. Like, we mostly got that right. I thought it was the best mix of guys we could bring. I personally think the things that were wrong were beyond roster selection and lineup selection, even, that I think the new coach is going to fix, right? Are there going to be some new players that come in? Yes. I almost guarantee that in World Cup 2026, we see 75% of that roster, right, returning minimum. So what we're talking about here really is we're talking about 3 spots maybe of field players, like, are there 3 spots that flop? Is there a goalie or 2? Important context to give, because I think, like, a lot of what I did, TAC, was like tried to like think, what do I like? It was almost like a scouting game, right? Who do I? None of these guys right now do I think should be on the roster. Let's just put that out there. I think you probably agree. Like, not many of these guys you're going to name are going to be like competing today, but it's like, what can the next 2 club seasons bring for these guys, right? That allow them to elevate. And that's a really interesting thing, right? Because listen, really good 18, 19-year-olds make the World Cup for nations. I mean, you're gonna see a guy in Spain star in next World Cup at 18. So it's really, before I give mine, I just want everybody to understand, like, it's projection forward, and I'm probably going to get them all wrong, and that's okay, right? So my 2 legit shots that I saw, positional awareness here, I think, is really important, right? What positions are we weak at, and are we gonna, because that gives somebody a better chance in my eyes, right? I still, even though he didn't play in this Olympics, I still have a lot of belief in the potential of Gaga Slonina. And I think that over 2 good club seasons, I think he could be the guy. It's a little bit of a lottery ticket here, but I think we're going to see a different goalie in the World Cup. I really do. At least backup, right? So you're making a roster. I'm going to choose Gaga as my like legit shot, best prospect in that group, best talent, and the guy who can like elevate to that level. So that's my one.
And just to make one thing clear, we're talking about roster, so he could even be the 3rd goalkeeper, which is not too crazy. Yeah,
right. And then my other one is Austin Trusty, right? Who I think that, once again, it's a position, especially if you think like left back for us, somebody that it currently is typically between Brooks and then Ream, who kind of was the successor to that. I know there's some guys in between. We won't talk about them, but we had like ball control left center backs. And I think that Trusty has the ability to do that. Once again, he's not I would give him a roster shot right now, to be honest. I think he's at a level where I'd like to see him get onto a roster. And for that reason alone, that's why I think he has a legit shot, because I think he has a legit shot in September to make a roster. So those are my 2.
Yeah, just to add one thing, the names I listed, Maloney and Booth, since Tyler's out from the September roster, and since I kind of want us to try to find someone to replace Aronson, I actually think Maloney and Booth for like a September roster, it wouldn't be a problem. I thought it would make sense to test them out, depending on who's the coach, of course. No, I agree with those. I think any of the goalkeepers is a fair shout. If you said Schulte for third option, even though he was meh in the Olympics, if you said Gaga, or you said any other goalkeeper prospect, like, hey, maybe a 3rd goalkeeper, it's not crazy. I'm not going to mention any goalkeepers on mine because I already knew you were going to do that for me. But I agree with the goalkeepers, and I think it's a fair shout, any of them. I'm going to go to my 50-50s. And my 50-50s, one of them is the one you mentioned already, Austin Trusty. for the same reasons. So I'm not really going to add anything to it because it's already the same as you, like the same reasons. The other name I wanted to mention for 50-50 is actually Kevin Paredes. Uh, Similar reasons that I mentioned Taylor Booth. Our winger depth is not great. Like, is it too crazy to say Kevin Paredes can overtake a Haji Wright or Brendan Aronson? That's not too crazy. He's been on a upward trajectory. So far, I think it's possible. But the thing with Kevin Paredes that's quite interesting is he did a great job in the Olympics with one thing: tracking back, defending, one-on-one defending. He was really good at it. And we don't have a backup left back. We still don't. Like Christopher Lund hasn't really been anything to stand out. Wiley, Tolkien. So I look at Paredes and I'm like, we can still bring a backup left back to A-Rob, but Paredes can be a winger and left back option. So depending on who's the coach, I don't think it's too crazy to think Paredes can make the roster. It might even be more than 50-50 considering if he continues the upward trajectory. He's been getting better every season, but I'll put him on the 50-50 category. And I think those two they have good shots to make it. Trusty, just like you said, and Kevin Paredes that currently plays for Wolfsburg.
Yeah, so we're going to start to cross over a little bit here, which I expected. Paredes was also on my 50-50 list. And Tack, great minds think alike for almost the exact same reason, right? I said positional awareness here. I think when you're thinking about this, right, like if you think about positions that, have, more depth, midfield, honestly, in my eyes, like it's going to be harder to penetrate that group for a young player, right? To your point, like that backup winger, I remember doing this with you. It was like, who's kind of backup wingers? I guess Gio can play there a little bit if we want to move him out of the midfield. It's tough. So that, yes, left back, yes, center back, right? If you watch the last video, my stock down was the USMNT center back. So like goalkeeper, right? These are the positions that we need to start to find who's going to be the guy that can provide depth to the roster. So Paredes, for the exact same reasons, I don't need to give any more, other than the fact that young players like him, like this season and next, we've seen guys at his exact level become very legit European, players, right? Very legit top 5 guys. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Probably a low, it's almost like, going to the casino, but it can happen, right? And he has the talent. He's in the right position. He's in the right kind of developmental club that it's very easy to see him becoming a guy in 2 years who could be certainly better than Brendan Aronson and certainly better than even Temi Weah, to be honest, right? Like that could very easily happen.
He might already be better than Brendan Aronson.
That's exactly right, right? So Paredes is one, and then you've talked really nicely in this video and last about Maloney. Same reason, right? Backup 6, especially with Tyler's another positional awareness piece. And Maloney is a guy who, potentially playing at a high level, same thing as Paredes, could, really establish himself in a way that he becomes a very legit roster guy.
Okay. Now the underdogs. And these are the big gambles, right? We could go here and just say, you know what? John Brooks, Greg Berhalter is gone. Maybe he sorts out his club situation. Maybe John Anthony Brooks is back, plays one more World Cup for the United States. Last one he played was 2014. He even scored. Great guy right there. But I'm not going to put John Brooks because we're projecting into the future. And I talked about Paredes being an upward trajectory. Brooks, as much as I disagreed with Berhalter's decision a few years back, he's been in a downward trajectory. Even got benched by Pellegrino Materazzo in Hoffenheim this season. So I'm not going to put Brooks. As the gamble ones, I mentioned, it's funny because I'm kind of repeating the positions. I'm talking about the 6 and the winger, 6 and winger. And because I'm not very creative, just like the MMA midfield, I'm going to stick to the 6 and the wingers. So wingers, I want to give a shout out and put as an underdog Griffin Yao. Why? He broke through for Westerlo in Belgium. Looks like he's going to get a move. And in the Olympics, when I was trying to look at player profile, what can the guy do in tight spaces? Can he beat his man off the dribble? Like, what's going on here? Can he create dangerous opportunities on his own, right? Not rely on anyone, not even combination play. And Griffin Yao showed that at times, that spark of talent. There's something there. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to maybe an Anderlecht and he's standing out. that he could fight for that spot, that roster spot. There's something there. The other one I want to give a shout out was a player that was extremely unimpressive to me during the Olympics. I didn't think he was good at all. And people were hyping him because of his season in the second division of Italy for Venezia, which is Tanner Tessman. Can play the 6. Got good range on his pass. I thought it was a bit too slow, too casual, not good in tight spaces. But I've talked about how the 6th position with Tyler not being fully fit, I don't know what's going on with Tyler Adams. Luke has to figure out a situation himself. I think there's something there that he could fight Tenor. And there are big clubs interested in him, like Fiorentina, talked about Inter Milan, Feyenoord. If he goes to one of these teams and he can actually play for them, and we see it because I don't want to judge the guy just based off the Olympics. Club matters. That's where you get a larger data sample size for it. So I'm going to go Tanner Tessman as one of the underdogs. I think he could make the roster. I wouldn't bet on it, but I think it's a fair shout.
I'm going to cheat a little bit, and you can cheat with me too if you want, but I'm going to give you 2 underdogs. I'm also going to give you 2 deep cuts just because it's fun. And
so you're going full Canadian and you're cheating?
I'm going full Canadian, putting the drones in the air here, Tack. Go ahead. I'm going to go Caleb Wiley as an underdog. I think you talked about left back being a position of need. I think that's a totally open spot. And, it's a guy who's getting a move to Chelsea, going to go on loan. But once again, never know, right? It's a lottery ticket there, but he's a good player. And we could see him elevate to a level where he's the best backup left back. Who knows? He could be the best left back in 2 years, but most likely
not too crazy. That's not too crazy. Yeah.
It's not too crazy, but I'd be really excited about it. I wouldn't bet on it. But Wiley's one. I think there's, right kind of player profile going to the right kind of place where, he's got to play well now. And then my second one is, and I think you'd be surprised by this one, but it's Diego Luna. And let me explain. I think that the next coach is going to understand that within the player pool, we have a lot of really good top to bottom. We have good creative midfielders, right? Which isn't something the U.S. has had in the past. There's a lot of guys who fit into a more traditional 10 role, which has kind of gone away in soccer, right? If you know soccer, just having a guy who's just like an old school 10, it doesn't exist in that way anymore, right? They play a lot of those guys as tucked in wingers. They play a lot of those guys in 4-3-3s. But I think that the next coach is going to find a way to use these 10s, right? Be it traditional and old school, be it new school, doesn't matter. I think we're going to and that's going to be Gio Reyna, right? I think the next coach is probably going to be a good coach, knock on wood, and they're going to say, we got a profile a guy here who's special. Let's figure out how to utilize him. So what does that mean? It means we need a backup, right? I think it's okay, we also need somebody like that who's a like for like in case, Gio needs to come out 70 minutes in, right? Diego Luna to me is that, right? I think there's a number of other guys who will fight for it, but I love Luna's progression in the last 2 years, and he's a guy who I could 100% see getting a move pretty soon, and I could see being a guy who just is too good at what he does to not put on the roster. Once again, I wouldn't bet on it. Tillman's pretty good, and Tillman's above him. And I think Tillman will be hard to beat out for that spot. But yeah, that's Luna. And then I'm going to give you my 2 deep cuts. I think it's not the craziest thing in the world to say, okay, who's going to be 18, 19, 20 and make this roster, right? Most good nations have one of those guys. They have a young stud who makes the roster. And we're not a lot of those nations. We're an easier roster to make. So 2 names I just want to put out there, deep cuts. Diego Cochin, a lot of people know, right? He's getting a lot of hype right now at Barcelona. They see him as potentially, the heir apparent to Ter Stegen and to be that next guy for them. It would be rare for a 20-year-old keeper to make it, but you mentioned before 3 keepers, right? Is he a guy that we've cap tied at that point, hopefully, and we're bringing because he's our heir apparent too? Even if we figured out kind of a guy who's going to play the 2026 World Cup, I could easily see Cochin, if we cap tie him, being yep, you're coming, man. You're 20, but you're next up, right? And the job is yours for 2030. So that's a very realistic scenario, right? Not starting, not being that guy at 20. I don't see that happening, but making the roster because he's kind of the next stud at that position. And then the other guy is Berkimas, who we just saw score an awesome goal today, who once again, 16 years old, You can 100% anticipate a big move to somewhere in Europe at some point. He is an absolute stud. If you've watched the youth national teams, he's been nothing but electric every time you've seen him play. He's played, I think, up age groups basically his whole life. So a really, really good talent, right? Probably not quite at the level of Kevin Sullivan, from my understanding, but kind of a notch below, but a really elite talent level. And he's a winger, right? So once again, at 18, it would be pretty incredible if he's good enough to be on the roster. But that's a shout if he just absolutely explodes. And it's kind of like think back to a lot of guys that have been brought to World Cups before they're ready, but they're just undeniable and they're coming up.
They're going to be our Theo Walcott.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, those are some wild picks, and we need to save this video because if you get any of those three right, it will be prophetic.
Yeah,
it really will. It really, any of those three, like Diego Luna, Berchimas, even Coachin, that's a very high ceiling player. If any of them are in the 2026 roster, we have to come back to this video, man. And about what you said before we close, you talked about how they mainly play like creators, like 10s out wide, and they tuck in. Yeah, we let soccer terrorists take care of the sport, and they've done that. I mean, Spain played a lot of Dani Olmo, more like, I believe he played as a 10 for Spain, and he killed it with also creative. Well, not really creative. Well, Lamine Yamal can create, but Nico Williams is more of a direct winger, right? Goes for goal. But I mean, they played with the 10 and it worked.
Pep's found a way to play Kevin De Bruyne, right? And so has Belgium for years, right? And that's not a guy who's like, oh, is he a straight winger? No, of course not, right? We're going to put him in the middle of the field. We're going to let him do what he does best, right? Which is make incredible passes over and over and over again. And it's a pretty simple formula to your point, Tack, right? Like, we don't need to overthink this, right? Just put the best guy you have on the field at connecting play in the spot that's most important to do it, which is the middle of the park.
I'll say one thing. The Copa America final, Messi essentially plays as a 10 for Argentina, right? Floating behind the center forward, creating. I know Messi is just like a different level of everything he does, but he more or less is like a 10, like a very fluid, free roaming 10. But the other team that made it to the Copa America final had a pure 10, James Rodriguez, a legitimate old school 10, balling out, in my opinion, the best player in the 2024 Copa America. And he was playing as a 10.
Absolutely.
And so it does work still in modern day soccer, and people should bring it back. But Adam, thank you once again very much. Everyone, if you just watched the episode, let us know your prospects or even veterans that you think will be in the 2026 World Cup. Maybe you guys think John Brooks will be there. And don't forget to drop a like. Don't forget to follow Adam on X. The handle's right below his head. He does great work there, and you guys won't regret it. Okay? Well, you might regret following me, but definitely not Adam. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Have a great day. And despite the horrible summer, there's a lot to look forward to. Adam, you want to say anything before we go?
Man, I'm excited to get a new coach on board and to have a couple camps in the fall where we have some new stuff to talk about. And it's not like, that's it, right? Like, in all honesty, even if the coaching hire isn't like absolutely, bang on amazing, there's going to be some light where it's going to be like, let's see, what's this guy doing? What are they about versus the pessimism I feel like a lot of us have had for the last couple of years. So it's an exciting time, Jack.
Perfect. And thank you very much for watching, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.